recession. Eggs are $700 a piece. I understand that good old America, and even when we disagreed, we got under the flag, saluted it, said the pledge together, and we became one. I realize that has crashed and burned, and that America has ripped in half. And yet, somehow, by the tattered fingernails, we are hanging on to the cliff, hanging on from the abyss, and I'm still on the air, which should tell you that either God is showing mercy or somebody is inept at the left-leaning dissemination of information ports by which they should have long ago, accidentally, we don't know what happened, made me disappear. But I'm here. I am God's comic, Brad Stine. And this is indeed the podcast of podcasts. Yes, boutique, I might add, just for the favored few. But we talk about the things that need to be discussed. We laugh about the things that need to be laughed about. And we watch and visit with folks who are unbelievable in their lane. If you haven't noticed, I don't have a lane. I went through the guardrail, and I'm hanging from one wheel off the bridge. That's the chaos you've come to love on another Monday night of Wyatt and God's Comic Brad Stine. And you know it as Brad Stine Has Issues. Shall we begin? Hey, it's another Monday night, and it's me, Brad Stine, God's comic. Brad Stine Has Issues, sitting here with my son and his buttons running amok. This is the podcast where comedy, conservatism, and Christianity collide in a cacophony of clarity. Wyatt, how are you, my son, my son?
I still like this button.
See, he loves his button, and you guys gave him that button. You're his little Santas. You're his little Santas out there giving him a button that comes on and off. Notice how
give me this button.
I want you to have it, but notice how I sound clear, and then suddenly you're going to hear me sound like I just fell in a cave. And if you're listening to the podcast only, look, he fell in a cave, but now he's back. So that's what happens when you give my son a button, which, by the way, should be a children's book. If you give your son a button and see all the chaos that ensues. Son, tell me about some chaos that's ensued.
Oh, gosh. I mean, you kind of got past the majority of the week, like, major stuff.
Yeah.
You know, just banks are collapsing, draining, I don't know, daggers or something. I don't know. The world is kind of in a weird place right now.
Isn't it, son? Do you think it's your fault?
On the advice of my lawyer, I declined to answer.
Wouldn't it be funny if in some Twilight Zone-esque episode, it's the fact that you got that button and every time you push it, catastrophe takes place through some ethereal portal and you never knew it and you're just thinking you're having a little fun here and next thing you know, you're wiping out an entire Malaysian community and it's just because your button? Wouldn't that be crazy?
I mean, I'm just going to say this right now, but it's not like regular life is already not like an episode of The Twilight Zone.
It is. And son, I appreciate that you even know Twilight Zone. I feel sorry for your son because I grew up in Twilight Zone, the original. I'm talking about Rod Serling Twilight Zone.
Yeah, the one where they couldn't afford color. Yeah, I know that one.
Listen, they could afford color, but guess what? They gave the guy a button, the color button, and the black and white button. And guess which one he preferred?
Black and white?
Yes. That's a little on the nose. I figured you'd have some pithy comment, but I guess I failed on that.
Look, I don't really understand what exactly you find so funny about monochrome color schemes, but it's kind of basic and boring and bland.
Is it? Basic, boring, and bland? You found the 3 Bs?
It's called alliteration, which unfortunately does not also begin with a B.
Listen to me. Marsha Pointer Reed is the first one online. And she says something like, "Good evening, Brad and Wyatt. Hi, I'm Marsha Pointer Reed." Guess who else came up? Keith Mauk. M-A-U-K. Eric Basil used to book you at Clean Comedians. Hardest I've ever laughed was at, and then he just stopped
It's a cliffhanger, I guess. Tune in next week to find out where they laughed hard.
Think about this, son. For the first time, I was about to get a compliment, and the man had a heart attack. Right in mid-sentence. He was going to tell me how great he was, but Eric...
I thought that it was amnesia kicked in.
Listen, Eric Basil, I do remember you. He is one of the beginnings of my career into the churches, and what created this ministry. Everything I've become was from Clean Comedians in California, and he did used to book me. He's a good guy, but son, he's in an old folks' home now, and he's hanging on by a thread. Do you think you could tell him a prayer, or at least send him a catheter? What do you think?
No.
Okay. Let's see.
It's just, I'm not going to try to make a joke about that, just no.
No, it was just sad to me. I really expected more out of you for him.
Well, I did too, but I mean, I don't know. I don't really do well with old folks' homes.
Boy, you can tell that.
Just,
say that.
You know, like there was a simpler time. Old folks' homes. Well, what do they have now? Nursing homes? Is that the same thing?
Yes, right. I mean, you get so bad at that age that you actually start nursing again. It's a sad
situation. I
situation.
thought it was when you get old, you get bored, and so you just go back to med school to become a nurse.
Well, why not? I mean, at least you're giving yourself, you've lived a good life. It's like, get a side hustle. That's what I say.
I mean, would you trust Mr. Jones, the 90-year-old war vet, to give you your nursing stuff?
Yeah, I would. I think that'd be cool because he'd have a great, he'd tell me war stories about, you know, D-Day, and it'd be great. Listen, I got to mention.
Good stories, I'd hope.
Well, yeah. Sherry Holtz Jordan, hi. Hot in Minnesota while shoveling today. 27 degrees. Couldn't wear a coat or gloves. I just thought I'd share. C. Frank West, shared from Springfield, Missouri. I don't remember C. Frank being on before. Has he, Wyatt?
As far as I'm aware, no.
Jim Bronow's here, and he comes all the time. Evening, Mr. Brad and Wyatt. Matt Morrison, hello from upstate New York. I'm trying to get out to upstate New York and do a small tour. Sign, you want to come with me?
No.
Listen, I'll let you drive in Manhattan.
No.
Okay, he hates New York City.
It was, without a shadow of a doubt, the worst experience of a quote-unquote vacation I've ever been on.
My son is not a good driver.
No, I'm a great driver. I just hate driving.
He does. And he was in downtown in Manhattan, and he wasn't driving, but he was like...
I was the passenger, and I still hated it.
Hey, Karen Boyd said, what? No Nick? Where's Nick? Wyatt, what have you done with St. Nick?
Why, Nick is all the way at the top of the chat where he belongs. Where's Nick?
Is he not there?
Nick. Attention, everyone. We have lost a Nick. If anyone has seen him, please return him to us.
Somebody get Nick. Carrie Hathaway. Hi, Brad and Wyatt from Gray Sky, Everett, Washington. Forrest Bainey, Wyatt. Who's got the coolest name in town?
Forrest Bainey.
Yes, sir. Forrest is with us. Welcome to an hour early of Wyatt Has Issues, and Brad, too. Amok, says Karen Boyd.
Ooh, sounds like somebody forgot about daylight savings.
Poor
I thought that
guy.
we have.
Maybe he's in a nursing home, son. Maybe he's in a nursing home. Oh, I thought this was Rad Shine Has Tissues. Whoops, wrong show. Laugh out loud. Greater than 3, suppose, glad to be home. I can't keep up with Jason.
Did you just audibly say greater than 3?
I don't know what it means.
Emoji, it's supposed
Listen, I am just an older man who's doing the best.
That's putting it lightly.
Yeah. Johnny Hale. Hey, Brad, how are you, my friend? Been a long time. Hey, Johnny Hale. Good to have you back with us. Beth Franklin, God bless you guys. He does. He does. I guess he's got no options. Gail Gamble, God's going to have a great lineup for us when we get to heaven. Shonda Pierce, Mark Lowry, the Ledbetter guy. I have to look that up and repost it. Let's see. Look at this. What happened to Sir Nick? Well, he's not Sir Nick. He's St. Nick. And look what showed up. Karen Boyd with family at the Houston Rodeo night. We'll have to watch the replay. Hello, everyone from Texas. Hey, Nick. Hey, we miss you. See, when one of our regulars are gone, son, it hurts. It hurts bad. It's like a dagger, like you said earlier. Angie Brown. Hi, Brad. Hi, Angie. James Sellers. Hello from Modi, Illinois. Let's see it. Deanna Miller. I made it. It held my notification settings from last week. Let's see how long that lasts. Yay, I'm glad you're here. Glad to have you back with us, young lady. Gail Gamble, Jerry Clower. Oh, he was amazing. Let's see. Chris Felthausen. Hello, everyone. Hi, Chris. John B. Lyons, greetings from beautiful Bourbon, Indiana. My goodness, son, did you know that your great-grandparents lived in Bourbon, Indiana?
No, I did not.
Do you know that you have cousins that live in Bourbon, Indiana?
I was about to say no, but we visit them every year, so I would certainly hope I remember that.
Why, did you know that bourbon is also something you can drink? Not you would, because you don't drink. You are a teetotaler.
I'm a what now?
You know what I'm talking about.
No, I know. I legitimately did not hear what you said. Did you say
You're
I drink tea?
a teetotaler.
A tea? We went to war over tea. Do you really think I'm going to go into that again?
Max Raymond Purdue. Hey, guys, rocking up in here. Carrie Tudor was going to Cove, France, but we in snow blizzard, so I'm home. Cove, France. Okay. Charmaine Lamont. She's different. Hello. Max Raymond Purdue, ha. Greg Smith, hi, Brad White from North Carolina, he's here. John P. Line, stoked for Saturday in Plymouth at the Reese. I'm going to be at the Plymouth at the Reese. That's where your aunt lives, Wyatt. Max Raymond Purdue, we fought hard back. Karen Roland, Karen from Texas, and it's 74 today. Let's see, John P. Line, you bringing White to Plymouth? I am not. He wanted to see you, son. He wanted to see what you look like, but we're going to keep you on the down low. Let's see, James Voigt set his alarm to tune in. It worked. Karen, Caroline, etc. Janilla, hi, Brad and Wyatt, much love from Long Island. Oh, she's a nice Italian. And anybody else that I didn't say hi? Okay, let's see. Oh, look what Jason Warden said. Brad Stine has the best audience. Your comments are awesome. Please keep them coming. He loves you all.
Breaking news. Local podcast audience has the best audience, according to the audience.
Patty Sheets, hi, Brad from Atwater. Samuel J. Sneed, hey, brother. John Walters, hi, folks. Diana Neal, hello from Wisconsin. Gail Gamble's here, you as well. Carrie P.J. Piker, hey. Clovis Jones, Wayne, Michigan, checking in. Samuel J. Sneed, Big Mossy Back, Bass Clower. Charmaine Lamont, hello from Texas. Mark Underwood, hello there. You know who's not here?
Nick?
Well, he's here now. Well, he kind of showed up for a second. You know who's not here? Benjamin Gregory. Who else? Paula Marie Feyrachi. Who else?
Canada?
Yes! Oh, you got it. It's good for you, son. Doggone it. Thought you were going to miss that.
Nope. I'm too smart for that.
All right. Well, listen, folks, this is very important that we are wondering whatever happened to our wonderful Canadian, but she's not here, and I don't want to, maybe she's hiding from Trudeau, so I don't want to give her away. But listen, folks, it's good to be with you. It's a special day. This is another Monday Night Edition, Brad Stine Has Issues. I'm also live on YouTube, though I never get to comment there because I can only be on one item at a time. If I had a professional producer, he'd show me how to do two, but I don't. I got Wyatt.
And if I had a professional artist running it, he'd give me the money to buy another iPad.
Speaking of buy another iPad, guess what we have? And I shouldn't have done it.
Oh, right. So audience, disclaimer, we did buy another button. Which, by the way, would you be so happy to press again? Because it apparently turned off.
Which one?
Okay, so it's just on the right-hand side on the side. Just press and hold it until you hear some beeps.
Oh.
Yeah. Thank you, yeah, there we go. There we go. Yeah, technology, huh?
Yeah. It is hard, Wyatt.
Yep.
Is it on?
Does it say HDMI out?
You know what it is?
What?
Insert SD card.
No, that shouldn't matter at all.
Powering off.
Okay, so you're not supposed to press that button.
Okay. Which one?
Does it say HDMI?
This says powering off.
What the? Let me see that real quick. Let me see that. Just pass it over the table. Well, folks, looks like our issues are started early.
Why isn't it working? Folks,
Just pass it. I'll take a look at it.
Wyatt had to go underneath. Now you know you're not going to ever see Wyatt. That's part of our little thing. I wonder if it's out of power, son. Is it full of power?
Nope, that's it.
Well, what happened?
I don't know.
All right. So there you go.
Poke it or something.
Oh, it's kind of sideways.
As long as it has the HDMI thing on it, it's good. Yep, there it is.
All right, so watch this.
Again, you gotta press and hold that button.
Okay, now watch this, guys. You ready for this? Wyatt got an... we were going to get a third camera. We needed 3. We knew that from the very
You
beginning.
mean a 4th camera?
Yes, but here's the thing. I wanted to get one so that when we have a guest, and we have a great guest tonight, you're going to love her, I promise. She would sit here, and then we would have an ISO on her so you could see them talk. And then there's this big shot that we have right here. And then there'd be a shot over here of me, so I'd get my own ISO. So it's very expensive. It took a lot of time because it's expensive for cameras, but we needed it. But in the meantime, we thought, what if we got a GoPro and use that instead? It's cheaper than a nice big camera. And we ended up getting it because we thought, well, maybe we can use it for something else. Like if I want to show a passage in a paper or in a book or something on my phone, we'd have this sort of on right here on the table thing. But he can actually get a shot of me at the table. Why? Can you show him that shot? Did it show? Because I can't tell, obviously.
Well,
is
you'll
it on?
find out in a few seconds.
Is it on?
Yeah, it's on.
So this is another angle. This is though you were, if you guys were sitting at my, Brad said, whoo, there it is. Look at this. So you're right here. You're literally right here. And I'm right at my new camera.
The audiences need to see that.
Well, because it's showing them how I have this, my own.
No, I understand that, but like, listen, it's just PR 101 when running a podcast.
Yeah.
Don't creep up toward the camera.
And
as close as
you guys can see what I'm always looking at over here. So you can see the inner workings, the dark underbelly.
Wait, turn it back before it goes to the part where you do that on the iPod. You're making like an infinite loop.
Oh, I don't want to do that, right? So see there oh, look, it's me. It's me looking at me, looking at me. Am I back in time?
This is what I warned you about. Don't.
Yeah, that's no good.
Maybe we shouldn't have all of the buttons in the world if this is what we do with them.
That's right. That's right. Well, listen, folks, I'm glad to have you with you. I wanted to show we have this new camera, and I never know if I'm here, if I'm there, but we do have a wonderful guest on tonight, Alyssa Childers. If you've ever seen her podcast, it's a great podcast that is an apologist. But what's really interesting about her is that her dad was Chuck Girard. Chuck Girard was one of the lead singers of the group Love Song, which is one of the original Christian music bands, contemporary Christian music bands. Started out at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa with Chuck Smith, and that whole Jesus Revolution movie that's been blowing up all over the place throughout the nation. Her dad is in that. I mean, his band is featured in that. And she now has an apologetics podcast. She's very well known, very articulate, excellent person. I've known her for many years. And she's going to be with us tonight. You're going to watch her talk about what she's doing, what she's up to, and a little bit about Jesus Revolution, Chuck Smith, and this whole movie that's really been taking the whole world by storm. But thinking of movies, we had something that took place last night. I thought I'd bring it up. Only because that's what I do. I bring up things that happened last night. If I brought up things that happened tomorrow night, I would be a prophet and I would be getting a lot more money or a lot more profit, if you know what I'm saying. Because I can see into the future, but I don't. I always have to wait for what happened last and then bring it into the now. That's how I do it. Why? Is there something wrong with that method?
Your methods are acceptable.
Okay,
at best.
Okay, so here's the deal. So obviously, the Oscars was on last night. Now, I remember as a kid, and I am older than all of you watching. All of you. I'm older. I don't look it because my genes are immaculate. Why? I have immaculate genes.
You probably took your jeans from my closet, like that shirt you're wearing.
Hey, do they like the shirt?
I don't know. Nobody's commented yet, so I'd say probably, yeah.
So tell me what is unique about this shirt, because you said there was something cool about it.
I mean, it's the box art for the original Super Mario game for the NES.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Did we play that game when you were a kid, son?
I don't think we owned an NES.
Okay.
I think we started with the N64.
Wasn't that fun?
Yes.
Wyatt, I remember when the first boss, which was King Bomb, was hard.
Boy, have times changed since then.
Lord, but that was so much fun. Oh, that was fun. You and I sat around when you were a little kid. You were just a little boy. Now, you still had issued from my loins. You did exist, but you were tiny. You were like this big. and it just turned off again, I think so.
Yeah, I'll probably have to go into the settings of it after this and turn that off if I can.
Okay. Well,
'Cause,
listen, they got to see what it looks
pro
like.
tip when running a podcast, camera shutting off prematurely for no reason is typically a bad thing.
Okay. Well, at least you've learned what the bad things are. You can't fix them. You can't analyze them. You can't get to the bottom of it in the middle.
Well, I mean, not doing an actual live recording. of
Exactly,
course.
and that would be the worst time to do it, is to fix it while we need it. Wait till after everything's shut down.
Would
and
you
people
rather
gone to
us
bed.
have a camera that sort of works or one that doesn't work at all?
Okay, well, anyways. Now you guys know.
Mm-hmm, that's what I thought.
Now you guys know that we are done getting cameras. We are,
No, we're not.
yes, we are.
We're done getting cameras thus far.
Well,
But the second you find another shiny toy that you just know is gonna help the podcast, I'm shutting out money to buy it, we're setting it up, and then that'll be the last one we buy.
when
Until
are
next
you
time.
going to get it through your head, son, that nothing is going to make this podcast any better? We are running on fumes as we speak.
I'm honestly not even sure how I'm even able to form competent sentences. I'm pretty sure I'm running off like 3 hours of sleep at this point.
It's quite apparent.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I am quite apparent because I made you and I created you, and together we've worked together to make the best of everything that we could under the circumstances.
Well, congratulations, you did it. The most obvious joke you could have possibly given us with that setup. Good job. You're clearly the comedian of this group for a reason.
Listen, I got to ask you a question. And I was going to go into my Oscar, and we're going to talk about the Oscars in just a second. But before I do, I did need to ask you a question. I haven't checked in lately on your experience, your incredible devotion, your love of your side hustle, your other job.
Ah, yes. Lowe's.
Yes, Lowe's.
Boy, howdy, Lowe's. What have you been doing?
So anything interesting happening at Lowe's?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, we got something real interesting.
Okay.
Okay, so, when you think of Lowe's, what do you think would make sense to be a business model for us?
Sell hardware.
Cool, okay. Can you think of anything else?
Sell hardware at the best price so people would want to buy
I
it
was
from
kind of looking for other things to sell besides hardware.
Okay, sell hardware, sell home goods like plumbing.
Yeah.
And situation.
And those are all brilliant, very accurate answers. Now, we are a pretty big store in the company. I think it was something along the lines of like 80 million plus last year.
80 million.
Yeah, and just by our store.
Nice.
So we are one of the flagship stores.
Nice.
So we are a big one. Now, what if I were to tell you that we've decided we're done just selling hardware. We're done just selling plumbing. We are aiming to give you an experience unlike anything anyone ever asked for.
Well, come, pray tell.
Lowe's has officially started hosting birthday parties. I am not kidding. We are literally Chuck E. Cheese for hardware enthusiasts.
So you're telling me that there are going to be parents in this earth who are thinking, you know, son, it's time for your birthday and we can't think of a better place to take you than to Lowe's. And the best thing about it is all of your friends that come to participate won't bring you a gift. They'll make it out of the scraps.
Okay, you say that, but you're actually not that far off. So
If you tell me that they have birthday parties and the kids sit around and build birdhouses.
okay. So what happens is we take the kids onto an aisle that we just think no one's gonna go to. It's not blocked off or anything. It's just an aisle that isn't useful. For the tables, we just get a bunch of cinder blocks and put a plank of wood over them.
Okay.
For the seats, we have our Lowe's branded buckets.
Okay.
And for the project, like the actual thing you're doing for 2 hours, you build birdhouses and other fun activities.
When someone is being sarcastic and demeaning towards an absurd leap into nonsense, that Lowe's is going to be the go-to for birthday parties. And in emphasizing that, he says, let me guess, the guests are going to come over, not bring a gift, but instead build birdhouses for the child. And that ends up being accurate. What does that tell you about the creative sources being used to move Lowe's to the next generation?
If you think that's bad, we're booked completely.
Meanwhile,
No. Also, guess what how much do you think that kind of experience would cost?
that's got to be a $100 experience.
Interesting. Interesting. Base price is $350, and cake is not included.
And people have sold out?
Yes. Now, to be fair, pizza is provided because apparently, if you go to Domino's and say, "Hey, I have the dumbest idea ever," they generally go, "Yes, this is what we want to finance. Okay. This is what looks good for us."
All right, so they went into business with Domino's. Well, listen.
Yeah.
I'm not here to demean.
Oh, and sorry, one more thing. It's so successful, they're already planning on expanding it to adults too.
Okay, well, listen, good for them. Here's the thing. I joke about Lowe's with you all the time, son. But the truth is, I want businesses to be successful. I want Americans to be successful. I want entrepreneurs to be successful. I want capitalism to thrive.
You know what? I do that too. However, if my flower shop decides now's a good day to build dominoes and sell them to people,
Yeah.
I'm going to question your choices.
Well, anyway.
Just a smidge.
But the truth is, it's working. That's my point. My point.
I don't know what I hate more, the fact that we're doing it or the fact that people are buying into it. Like,
but listen,
what is more concerning?
Yes, but it works. And that's all I care about. The fact that it is working and people are enjoying it, good for them. Good for them. Listen, I mock it, I make fun of it, but it's a successful business. I want things to be successful because listen, there was a time in America where we cheered each other on. If you came up with some pickle barrel that you took on the back of a cart and you took it to somebody's house and said, "You want to buy pickles?" And somebody said yes, and you had a way of making a living. This had never happened before in history. You know, if you were in England back in hundreds of years, you know, you were a peasant or you ended up being, you know, the guy that threw rocks at the windows to wake people up because they didn't have alarm clocks. I mean, that was what you got. You come here, you can sell pickles. You can make bird houses and people will flock to your door. That's the American way. And Americans have always been the type of people that believed in hard work. Now, we've got a new America that's being destroyed as we speak, right in front of our eyes. It's literally just disassembling because they're taking everything that we used to make this nation great, which was hard work, risk, commitment, discipline, delayed gratification, and we've turned it into just a feast of frivolity, a feast of bare, basic, candy-coated extravagance without depth, like the Oscars. Now, I used to watch the Oscars growing up, son. I saw the guy years ago, that streak that was popular in the 70s, and you'd run past things naked, and the guys came and streaked on the stage. And the time that Marlon Brando turned down his Oscar, and a woman came up and said she was a Native American and wanted to talk about the plight of the Native Americans, and he couldn't accept it under that premise. And I saw that happen, and it was royalty, and you cared about the movies, and you watched, and it was fun to see who won. And years ago, once they started going wokey, and they've gone wokey before we knew even the word woke, but they began to proselytize. They began to take anti-American, communist, Marxist crap and spew it as though these people had some sort of depth of virtue by which we should sit and bow. And it became so despicable to me. It became so difficult for me to watch that I saw this lack of gratefulness, that you're making all this money and getting all this fame for doing nothing but acting, which is not that important. It's not that important. Stories are important. Telling a story is important. They're talented people, but they're not important. They're just adding to the culture. And they see themselves as more than that. Matter of fact, if I remember, did a joke about this years ago, about the Oscars, about this sort of frivolous way of getting a lot of money for doing something that really isn't that big of a deal. Matter of fact, let's run that way. Show them what I talked about a number of years ago in my comedy set about the Oscars and models and everybody else that gets paid for basically just being born. Why hit it?
I'm so tired of the kids. It's so hard. It's supposed to be. It's supposed to build something that we've lost in this country. It's called character. Hard is good. Hard is supposed to be good, but what we have here is a loss of understanding of what made this country great. You know why? Because we've got so much abundance that we don't appreciate it. And so what we no longer look up to is the clergy to lead us. No longer look for honorable men to lead us. We look to actors to lead us. God bless you, Sean Penn. You're a great actor, but I don't care who you're voting for. When you're taking your little Oscar, sit down and shut up. I don't care. It's supposed to be an awards show, not a political statement. These are the people that have 50 singing award shows a year for themselves in $500,000 gowns and acting like they care for the downtrodden. Hypocrisy at the highest level. You're just an actor. You pretend to be somebody else for a living. What's the big deal? In your world, it's acting. In our world, it's called schizophrenia. But we see it all the time, caring about people that don't give enough back. Where do you see it the most? Where do you see it the most? Supermodel. What's that thing they do at the end? How is that supposed to be attractive? Yes, I walk like no girl on earth, and then I have a problem with my spine. Did I mention that part? They walk for a living. That's all they do. And then they have that arrogant attitude like they're doing something that we can't. Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. I can walk and wear clothing. Woo! I'm unbelievable. You simply walk for a living. The only thing, I've never heard of a job whose only requirement is you have to be born. Because it's just genetics. That's all they do. That's all they do. And yet what I find is that they're not grateful for getting overpaid. They're thinking not grateful at all. They just talk about how much pressure it is. You ever heard of oh, it's so much pressure being a ramp model. How much pressure can it possibly be? All right, girls, walk to the end of the ramp. Don't walk off. Spin around, walk back, and I'll pay you $100,000. They make $100,000. You want to know your culture's crumbling from within? When a model makes more money in an hour walking a ramp than a teacher makes in 5 years, that's when you know you got a problem in your culture about caring for those who give too little back.
So that was me talking about rent models and the Oscars in 2004. So everything that Ricky Gervais actually said a few years ago about what they should do and get back to their seats, I literally said, man, almost 20 years ago. So I've always seen the crazy, and I wanted to talk about the crazy. And then when I started seeing that this is getting out of hand, that the crazy is starting to cause us to lose freedom, liberty, and how real it's become, how we don't even know if we're free anymore, if we can vote anymore. It's all been shoved down our throats, and it's happening so fast that clearly it's designed. There's a game afoot, and if we don't fight, we will not be here. It's not rhetoric. It's not conspiracy theory. We simply will not be free. It's already taking place. So I want to remember what it meant to have differences of opinions, have different points of view. I want that. We need that. That's what free speech is. It's important. It's crucial. But there has to be a foundation that gives us some kind of unity. There has to be. A house divided falls. And I've said this for quite some time, and you guys have been hearing it. And when I brought it up to other guests, I find them really resonating with this. So I must be onto something. But when I've talked about what we're going to have to do as Americans, and that only the civilians are going to be able to defend this nation, you will never, ever, ever be saved by the Democrats or the Republicans. They have completely sold our nation out, and they are completely corrupt to the core. There might be a couple here and there that are trying to do good. I think Lauren Boebert is a real Christian and a real conservative and trying to do good. I think that, let's see, there's got to be somebody else. I mean, you don't know who these people are. You just try to watch their fruit and what they say and what they do. They're not perfect. Nobody is. But those who actually went there to try to make a difference and change things. Marsha Blackburn, I think she's a real Christian and a real conservative. I mean, I've seen a few of them. Carrie Nome in South Dakota, governor, is... I think legit conservative and real and trying to do things. So there's a few, but if you see them basically telling you what you want to hear and then they do nothing while they're in office, or they just have committees and they ramble and shake their fingers and then nothing happens, they're in on it. They need to be abandoned. They need to be despised. And you know I always hit more on the Republicans because they were the ones that said they would defend the Constitution and our First Amendment rights and our freedoms and bring back balance. And of course they lied to us. And Judas to me is always worse than a demon, because I know what a demon is. Judas I believed. But I've told you guys that there's clearly a difference now between an American and a citizen. A citizen is somebody who becomes a citizen in the United States through hopefully fair and honest means, spends time, proves that they want to participate, takes the test, shows that they show understanding of our history, take the oath, and become a citizen of the United States. But an American is someone who respects our history and lionizes it, and doesn't forget the bad parts of our history. Of course that exists, but everybody has that. See, that's what I don't understand. Every country, every tribe, every family has bad crap in their history. If that's how they're going to be judged, then nobody should ever speak to anybody anytime, because we all have horrible, sinful, evil moments in our life that we wish we could make disappear. And we're grateful that we've been able to move on. But a few years ago, I came across a plaque. You know, if you ever drive or walk through the parks in the United States or go through certain sometimes battlefields and so forth, they'll have little plaques up there that talk about a battle that happened here, or some general here, what this house represents, or when they built this log cabin. And I saw this plaque a while ago, and I took a picture of it. Why are you able to put that picture up while I say this? If you can't, then don't. But
I can try to do it.
Okay.
Like, what are you doing this? Yeah.
But it simply said what it meant to be an American. It was a plaque, and I think it might have been in Tennessee. I'm not sure. I'd have to look to see where but I saw it and I clicked it. But I'm going to read it to you now in public at a park, perhaps a battlefield. It said this: I do not choose to be a common man. It is my right to be uncommon. I seek opportunity to develop whatever talents God gave me, not security. I do not wish to be kept citizen. I don't want to be a kept citizen, humbled and dulled by having the state look after me. I want to take the calculated risk to dream and to build, to fall and fail and to succeed. I refuse to barter incentive for a dole. I prefer the challenge of life to the guaranteed existence. I'm sorry, let me say that again. I prefer the challenges of life to the guaranteed existence. The thrill of fulfillment to the state calm of utopia. I will not trade freedom for beneficence, nor my dignity for a handout. I will never cower before any earthly master, nor bend to any threat. It is my heritage to stand erect, proud, and unafraid, to think and act myself, enjoy the benefit of my creations, and to face the world boldly and say, this, with God's help, I have done. All this is what it means to be an American. Folks, if we do not demand that Americans return to America, respect it, honor it, talk about any part of its history that is true, but expect every person here to become an American fan and defend it, then we're going to have to draw a line in the sand. I told you that I was in the midst of creating a militia, a real militia that was given to us in the Constitution. But this one is called the militia of the mind. So where we're going to outthink these people, outwork these people, outpray these people, outfight these people, and see if we can defend this nation, bring it back to balance. And that will be with the mighty 10,000, the first 10,000 American citizens who say, oh, I'm going to donate $3 a month. And with that, we're going to use it to try and put out videos and DVDs that are videos or downloads that talk about America and our history, our freedoms. It'll be hopefully in a funny way, but deep. We're going to put together armies of people who are specialists in defending this nation, and we're going to become one where you guys can bring these people into your town and teach you how to defend your town. Seriously defend it against evil and against darkness, whether they are in a school board or whether they are businessmen or whether they are simply anarchists that need to be stopped, and I mean stopped with the full weight of your boot. This is what I'm trying to help create. Just thought I'd be a comedian, but no, God said I have some marching orders. Love for you to join me. And that's what we're going to try to do. I hope by May 1st we'll be able to start the subscription where it'll be able to bring people in to begin the mighty 10,000. The only top 10,000 that will ever be able to claim that title as the beginning of this militia of the mind. Hopefully we'll have more 100,000 people, million people. They're American citizens. But the mighty 10,000 will be the ones that said, I'm going to dignify and announce myself and put myself in front of the world and say, I am ready to fight, die for America. That's what I'm trying to do. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. In the meantime, if you believe in what we're doing and think that more material like this needs to go out, well, you can donate. Just say, I'd love to help you and donate you. And you can give a gift, and I'll give you a link, and you can put it into that. It's my ministry, God's Comic Ministry. But in the meantime, I've got a very special guest. You know, if you guys have watched anybody out there that does apologetics, talks about God, the deep places of God, oftentimes there's Frank Turek, there is William Lane Craig, brilliant guys. There is John Lennox. They're excellent. Nancy Pearcey. But you don't see a lot of women. Well, this is a woman, and she's great at this. She's got a wonderful podcast. And she also is the daughter of Chuck Girard, who was Love Song, one of the original Christian, contemporary Christian music bands, and who was in The Jesus Revolution, which is the movie that is all over the country right now. Her name is Alyssa Childers, and she came on to talk about life, America, Christianity, what's going on, what's it mean to be a woman, how that might be different, and how we look at the world, what it means to stand up for Christ in real time and take whatever comes our way, because this is the cost. There is a cost of discipleship. That's what she talks about. It's fascinating. You're going to love her. So I want you to sit back and relax and enjoy this conversation, because I really think you're going to get a lot out of it. And as I said, if you want to become part of the Mighty 10,000, simply make a note or go to my contact, bradstine.com, put your name, address, email. I need it so I can, if I ever get pushed off the air, I'll be able to contact you. Say Mighty 10,000 and put your email, your name, and put Mighty 10,000 next to it so we just know, so we can get you in line. So once we're ready to launch, we can just let you know and you can jump in and off we go. The fight begins. So that's what we can do. You can donate or you can just watch for free until either God helps us turn it into something that has some momentum and helps us fight, or we'll just be, I'll be killed, I'll die, I'll be pushed off the air. Who knows? Who knows? But I've decided I was willing to accept that. So enjoy this interview, and let's just see if you might get something here that you didn't have until you showed up on Brad Stine Has Issues. Son, if you would, bring on Alyssa Childers. Now, I know what you're thinking. You know, when we come to Brad Stine Has Issues, it's because you know everything. We don't know anything. We need you. You're desperately important to culture, to Christianity in general. Many of you have written in saying, how has Christianity survived this long without you? And I have to, you know, I cast those aside, but it's true. There's a lot of great and amazing insight that I bring to you folks. But then again, once in a while, God throws me a curveball. And he brings somebody on the podcast that might even know a little bit more than me. And I find that to be frustrating, especially if it's a woman. And it happens to be. So things are going crazy. God is really humbling me today. And for those of you who are tuning in for the first time and think I'm a misogynist, no, I'm a comic is what I am. And if you can't take a joke, you might want to go find the Buddhist podcast, because I'm sure they'll be sweet to you. I'm not. But what I will bring you is people that matter, people that stand for conviction, people that stand for truth, people that care about what's happening in the culture. And as Christians, not only are we supposed to care about it, we're supposed to try to redeem it, or at least put out potential healing aspects of what God has told the human race to act like, to see what he might do with it if we can hang on to where America and the rest of the world is heading. So the particular artist that I'm going to bring on, you might have known first as a singer in Zoe Girl, which is ironic because I was asked to audition for Zoe Girl. And she got the role. Can you imagine? But then she decided, you know, it's not enough to be a great singer and songwriter, but I'm also going to become an apologist. And not only is she doing it, but she's doing it really well. And we need her. So I'm grateful that she's here. And she happens to be an old friend, which is another rarity that I've kept a friend. So please welcome to Brad Stine Has Issues, my wonderful guest, Alyssa Childers. God bless. How are you, baby?
Good. I feel very oppressed by that opening.
That's what I shoot for. I shoot for oppression. I want you, what I try to do is bring you to tears. That's what I shoot for.
Well, you did not succeed with that, but
dang it.
I do feel mildly oppressed.
Yeah,
so.
that's good.
So.
But you identify as
well, let's see. What is the day? What is today?
I think it's Monday. It's podcast night.
Identify as a Southern Baptist, but, well, I would say I am a Southern Baptist, but I identify as an Anglican. But now also maybe a little bit of Lutheran.
Nice.
Because I visited a wonderful Lutheran church, and thought I'm going to add a little bit of that into
My concern with that is I believe you're appropriating their culture. So that to me bothers me deeply. I think let them have a little bit of something left over, because there's so much little left. Well, thank you for coming on. You know, we went to church together years ago, but the first time we met was at a festival or something, to whatever they would call it back in those days, when Christians got together and sang a lot.
Yes.
And then they threw in the novelty act, which was me. But for those who don't know, listen, she did sing with a group called Zoe Girl, and they were very successful and very popular. But before we get into the real meat of what I wanted to talk to her about, I do want to establish her pedigree. So we're going to go a little bit deeper than just Alyssa, because many, many, many years ago, when I was a little lad, my dad moved to California. And my sister, who was older than me, would attend Calvary Chapel in Chuck Smith's Calvary Chapel, the original Calvary Chapel, the one in the tent Calvary Chapel, the one where the idea,
way back,
where Jesus Freak, the actual term Jesus Freak came from, because this guy would go baptize people in the ocean. And there were some albums that you could buy. That's right, albums you could buy, which is just one step from like Stone Age. But that's what we used to get, is gigantic discs. And she bought one and she gave it to me when I was a little, I don't know, maybe I was 11 or 12. And it was called Love Song. That was the name of this little album. And I listened to it, and I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was so wonderful and different than anything I had heard before. And, of course, that was a group of people. In particular, lead singer was a guy by the name of Chuck Girard. And I really dug what he was doing. And then he went on to do a little bit of soul stuff, and I loved that music as well. And I just kind of was my entry into contemporary Christian music. And come to find out, this man had met a woman, got married, and decided that the best thing to do now is to have children. And out of that lineage, you happen to be one of those.
That's right.
So, and I didn't know that. I don't think all the years I knew when we were at the church together that was your father. So why don't we just sort of give a little shout out to that? But tell me a little bit about that. So you grew up, I guess, in Southern California?
I did. My parents moved from Orange County, where Calvary Chapel was, to the San Fernando Valley when I was a year old, because the music business was there at the time, because my dad was in the music business, as you mentioned. So I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, and I love that my roots are Calvary Chapel, because I love to talk about what God did among the hippies. And what I also love is that my dad was a first-generation Christian, so he didn't have all this kind of church baggage. Yeah. And I think that was a really cool part of his story, and just love that my parents honestly modeled for me genuine Christianity. And that doesn't mean they were perfect, but, they repented to us in front of us, and they were just the real thing.
Was he a hippie, like kind of?
He was. When he got saved, he was a total hippie.
Yeah. I mean, that was that time. That's what they were. And so many got saved that out of that. Yeah. That kind of milieu was this hippie thing, and some of them went off to the drug culture, the sex with everybody's culture, and others somehow there was a spiritual awakening amongst those folks.
And that's where he was he was searching for God through the drug culture and through Eastern mysticism and New Age, the Arancho book, and it wasn't until he walked through the doors of Calvary Chapel where he heard the gospel for the first time.
So, did you go to Calvary Chapel yourself? Did you guys worship there?
Well, no, not after I was a year old, because we had moved about an hour away.
So you were just little. You don't even. Yeah,
but I do remember we would go back every once in a while, and I called Chuck Smith Papa Chuck, and
so
he'd give me $1 on my birthday and that kind of thing.
Yes. Well, I got to say something about that, because I went to the church for a while, periodically. And it was the first time I had been in a charismatic church, though you wouldn't know there. They were pretty subdued about that thing. They agreed with it, but you didn't see anything happening. You didn't see, maybe they'd lay hands on somebody now and again, but usually it was off to the side or something. But and this is not really about us, but we're Christians, so I want to talk about kind of that culture, because there's been a couple people in my life that I've observed, and I've been a Christian since I was 9. So I've done the whole gamut, the full-blown charismatic to the Catholics are all going to hell because they're not one of us. I played the whole game of working it out with fear and trembling. But there's been a couple guys I've met or been around in my lifetime that just seem to have a different flavor to their persona. There's this kind of a sweetness about them that just, like, how do you do that? And Chuck Smith was one of those guys. There was something about his countenance you couldn't fake. He had this real joy and love for people and God. And I'm like, how did he do that?
Yeah.
Because I don't like half the people that I meet, certainly the Christian. But, I mean, maybe you knew him better. Was he pretty authentic in that regard as far as you knew?
As far as I know, yes. I didn't know him incredibly well, like very deeply. But, everything that my parents have to say about him would line up with that he, he really guarded doctrine well. And especially in that hippie revival, sometimes people have tried to sort of portray it as if it was just this kind of like, oh, whatever, and that they didn't really preach the gospel. But Chuck Smith taught sin and repentance. I mean, he taught the real gospel, and that's what sometimes gets missing from the story. But no, he was the real deal as far as I know.
Well, my favorite story was, I just remember when they started coming to his church, these hippies, they had just got new carpet.
This is true, yes.
Yeah, and his board or elders or whomever, I don't know, were saying, look, these guys are coming in, they don't have shoes on, they're coming from the beach maybe, surfers, they're ruining the carpet. So what are we going to do? They're waiting for him to say, well, maybe we should have a special pen for the hippies or some kind of thing. He said, then tear out the carpet. That simplicity is Jesus.
Yeah.
How about we just care about these people? And the rest of this is superficial nonsense. It doesn't matter.
And my understanding is it was actually his wife that kind of convinced him to open the doors. Like, I think, as the story goes, as far as I understand it, he was maybe a bit hesitant at first too, just kind of like, this is kind of weird, what do we do? And it was his wife that said, God's brought all these kids to you, preach the gospel to them. And,
Well, and I know that just how easy it is for every church to say the same thing. We welcome everybody. No, you don't. Well, you can come here, you're a prostitute. No, you don't. You don't see I mean, maybe if they're not telling you, but it's not blatantly obvious. I was at a church in California before we moved to Nashville that they had a beach ministry. This is close to Laguna Beach, Laguna Niguel. And they would take a bus on Sundays and go get homeless and bring them to church.
Yeah. I went to a church that was did that sort of thing.
It's so wonderful. What a beautiful being Jesus. And then you find out, Elizabeth, they smell like pee. They got vomit on them. They have hepatitis C. They're drunk. They're crazy, some of them. And you realize, oh, this is more than a metaphor. This is real. You really do this thing, there's something at stake. It's not, because you have kids that, what if they harm? And so this idea of trying to understand what it means to be a true Christian and be that person that brings in all the lowliest of lowlies and try to be kind and loving to those people in an American Christianity that wants everything safe and clean and sanitary is a difficult reality when you really have to face this truth of what God expects of us. And I wanted to move into the world that you have now become quite adept at and are building quite a reputation, and good for you because it's so necessary. I knew you as a fellow attendee of church. I knew you as a singer. I was a comic, and we'd be at festivals and whatnot together and so forth and so on. I don't know. I think maybe there's a sense of thinking that people in the business are kind of superficial maybe, or just kind of, that's kind of what they do and that's their little thing, but they're not really deep. And I come across the internet, I'm looking through stuff, and you pop up, and then she's got her own little podcast, and I'm going, well, who doesn't?
Right.
But you're sitting there talking to some pretty deep intellectuals, and you're sort of engaging them in this deep, beautiful way, because I love apologetics and philosophy, and I have studied it my whole life. I'm an autodidact. I didn't go to seminary or whatever. Yeah. And I was like, what the heck? So the first truth is, the one thing about my podcast is truth only. Mm-hmm. And we actually have real conversations, which means you're allowed to be ignorant. You're allowed to say things that might offend people. We don't give a crap because we're seeking for truth, and so we're just allowed it. So my vulnerability is, I don't expect it from a woman. I don't. My bad, because one of my best guests I've ever interviewed was Nancy Pearcey.
Oh, yeah.
Who's a freaking genius.
Yeah, she's a beast.
She is.
Yeah.
And I love her. But, so that's kind of, so talk to me about the culture, and this has been coming up a lot now in the evangelical world, especially among the Southern Baptists, about women's role in teaching in the church. Yeah. Because, you know, where you're taking it, that kind, you're not pastor, but you're kind of putting yourself in that category, which you do well. But I'm just wondering, have you ever had any pushback about that, or something odd about being female?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a woman, anytime you make content and put it online, somebody is going to come in the comments and put the Bible verse about, you know, I don't permit a woman to speak. And so I've had to think that issue through very deeply for myself to figure out, you know, what do I think the Bible is actually teaching on this? Because that's ultimately the goal that all of us should have when we read the Bible. And so, interestingly, my position on that actually changed. I grew up in a denomination that ordained women as senior pastors.
What was that?
Foursquare.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I went to high school with girls that are now pastors of their own churches. So that was not even a conversation I was aware of. I mean, I thought maybe it was the weird, you know, I thought the Baptists were weird that they kind of didn't let women do that. But I didn't realize that was such a big issue. Now, it was after, and I'm sure we'll probably talk about this, but after I went through a very significant faith crisis, and I just kind of, everything was just stripped down to the studs. And I had to build it all back up. When it was being built back up, and I learned actually how to read the Bible properly. I didn't really know how to do that my whole life. I loved the Bible, read the Bible my whole life, but I didn't understand how to interpret it. Just the principles of hermeneutics and things like that, how it's been historically interpreted, all of those things put together. As I was putting back together my worldview, essentially, I actually changed my position on that. So I'm probably what people would refer to, I don't like labels, but probably what people would refer to as a soft complementarian. So what that means is that I believe that the Bible teaches that men and women are created equal in value and worth, both made in the image of God, but they have different roles in the home and in the church. And so because of that, I've had to really think through, like, well, what is Paul getting at when he says, I don't permit a woman to speak? Well, it's obvious he did in other contexts, because women would prophesy with their heads covered.
And churches had their own home churches where people would get.
And so there were things like that. And so what I think the issue is for Paul, and I've worked this out with people at my seminary, my husband and others, my pastor, I think that he's getting at authority. So that's why if I'm invited to preach a sermon on a Sunday morning at a church, I'll actually decline that request. And in favor of maybe just doing an interview like this, so that there's no perception of authority, because I don't think that's my place as a woman. Now, as far as creating content and putting it on the internet, I'm not in charge of anybody on the internet. People can take what I say or leave it. It's not, and I also think Paul's command was in the context of church government. So and so I'm actually okay speaking at a conference where there's a mixed audience, which I know not everybody would agree with me. Some people would think I'm a liberal for saying that, but I've just tried to work it out as best I can, and that's where I've landed.
Yes. Well, I think that's I got to say that it's a beautiful sophistication, because I got to say, if I hear a woman speak and I'm moved by that, I like it. I just want truth. Just tell me something that can teach me and learn. So I don't have a personal problem with a woman giving me information I don't have and a depth I need. But but that's kind of the conclusion I reached. Was it felt like it was more about, I have a hierarchy, saith God, by which I place things, not because I say she's less than. I've decided to create some disciplined rules that I expect you to behave with. I don't give a crap if you like it or not. This is how the world's going to work, and I'm making it. And by the way, it was a result of the fall, by the way. Women and men were seen to be equal until the fall. They says, now that you've done this, It's going to hurt when you have babies. It's like these things.
I still actually think there was hierarchy before the fall.
Okay.
I do. I think that there was, you have man being created first. It's not good for man to be alone.
Yes.
Then woman is created out of his side to be a helper to him, which, by the way, a lot of people think, they think that's really misogynistic, that the Bible would say that she's to be his helper. But the Hebrew word is a word that's, it's ezer, and that's a word that actually describes God himself several times throughout the Old Testament. So helper, like in the way that the Holy Spirit would help. So it's not like a glorified nanny or a cook, but actually a helper to fulfill the calling and to support the man.
Well, amen. And I apologize for her using Hebrew, folks. I didn't know she was going to go. But it's a bragging thing. She's like, oh, I speak Hebrew.
I do not. I do not speak Hebrew.
I speak Greek.
I know a few words.
She knows Greek and Latin.
No.
And Pig Latin. She did earlier.
I do. I am fluent in Pig Latin.
Okay, good.
Yes.
But one of my comedy routines is about the idea of men being created first and made out of dirt, right? And that's why we like getting dirty, because it's like a family reunion. But women came from us and so forth and so on. But like you said, I feel like it's an honor, because I say to folks, so women were the last thing created on earth, so you were literally the completeness of the universe. You were the last thing. He's like, now it's very good. It's good until then. Then you guys showed up, and it was very good. And men get to look at women naked, and they go, yeah, I agree. But that's how men are. But, I think what a lot of people miss, especially non-Christians, the secular who despise us, is they feel like there is this misogyny or this lack of dignity. And it's like, no. This is a discipline that we choose to bring upon ourselves because we think it makes for a richer life.
Oh, yes.
A richer way to see things. And any man who loves his wife would never thinking of her less than. But in fact saying, I need your insights. I need your wisdom. I need your sensitivity, your empathy. I don't have that. Like you do.
Yeah.
I mean, God must be male and female, because he said, I made them in the image. He made us male and female. So he must have these attributes already intrinsic in him. And then he separated us, so we have to come together and demand that we see what it looks like when we become one flesh, because we choose to. So it's a beautiful thing.
Yes, it is.
But you have to choose that the systemic narcissism that now rules the earth is no longer going to be what drives us. But we, in fact, allow ourselves to bow the knee when God asks us to. But who wants to do that?
Yeah.
It's original sin. No,
Yeah.
I rule. I run the show. Well, would you call yourself an apologist? Would you call yourself, do you have a title in the way you perceive what people think of you as?
People think of me as an apologist. Yeah. I don't really feel like I've earned any title other than just struggling Christian who scrapped it out to try to figure out what I think about all this stuff, really. I'm not an authority on anything. I'm not an expert on anything. I just basically had my faith after the church that we were at together, the church that we went to, my husband and I went to after that. It was a church that was on its way to becoming progressive, and I didn't really know that. I didn't pick that up at the time. I had some naivety.
Well, you may not even know what it was, because it kind of got snuck in on us.
It did, yeah.
What was this?
Exactly. Yeah. And so I was in a small class, and it was the pastor had already deconstructed, and he was trying to get other people into deconstruction, and he was very good at it. And so that's kind of, I don't really use the word deconstruction to describe what happened to me now that I've studied deconstruction, because I actually don't think deconstruction is based on objective truth or the Word of God. It's really based on figuring out what works for you. But it really, like, my faith was stripped down to the studs, and I really came to the edge of not even knowing if God existed.
Because you were being maybe taking what was typically historical Christianity as you saw it, the foundational truths that made us believe that Christ and evangelicalism and how we're supposed to approach people was our foundation, and suddenly you're being told, no, this is not good, this is unhealthy, this is somehow a suspect.
Well, back then, so this would have been over 10 years ago. So back then, the conversation hadn't quite switched, because now this is, everybody's saying it's harmful, it's toxic, all these moral categories. Back then, when I was in the class, this pastor was actually trying to intellectually prove that the Bible wasn't reliable, that we don't even have an accurate copy of what they originally wrote, that what they wrote probably wasn't even written by the people we thought wrote it, and things like that. And so because I had based my entire life on the Bible, when he convinced me intellectually that the Bible actually isn't even what they wrote, that's when everything unraveled for me. And then as I think that whole critical theory component that brings in the oppressed versus oppressor, that all kind of converged, I think, over the past 5 or 6, 7 years. And it's interesting you bring up the issue of women. Part of the reason I think that it's viewed this way now, like somebody might view you as misogynistic or me as self-oppressed,
right,
because I have this view, is because of the way we've redefined justice in our culture. Justice is now equal outcome for everyone. So if a woman doesn't have the same exact role as a man in church, that's viewed as not just like a different theological opinion, but that's actually oppression in today's view.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Is this church still flourishing in this area that you were at?
No, it's not. I mean, I think it still exists. It's mostly an online presence as far as I understand. Okay. There's a few families that still meet together, I think, once a week, but the pastor that was there when I was there is no longer there, and I think it's more of a social media presence than anything else.
Last time they saw him, he had a millstone around his neck. But I hope. You know, it's funny, the Bible says to Christians, God, it's so hard to be a Christian. Guys, it's hard to be a Christian, because we're told to do things that are so unnatural as to be ludicrous, unless it's the greatest story in human history. But one of the things that God tells you is you Christians have to give away what they need. I need love. Well, then go love somebody first. Well, I need money. Well, then you give to somebody that needs it even worse. Well, I need empathy. Go be empathetic. So it's this beautiful seed planting construct that is expected of us, because it makes us not like the rest. That we're supposed to be freaks, and historically we were. As they fled the villages during the Black Plague, our crazy people went back in and said, "We ministered. We're going to die." I know. Well, no, that's crazy. When the children are left on the side of the road in the Roman times to die, especially the female babies thrown into latrines, left to exposure, we'd pick them up and bring them in. There was no such thing as empathy for the other, especially the other not being in your immediate family. So all the wokeists, all the progressives out there who think that you found something new and fresh about justice, all you've done is counterfeited ours. You're stealing from us, the Judeo-Christian ethic, but you bastardized it. It comes with no empathy, it comes with no forgiveness, it comes with no repentance, it comes with no discipline, and it comes with no expectation that you have to give to others. Systemic narcissism. Not systemic racism, that don't exist. But this is what I fight against, and this is why people that are doing what you're doing are so crucial. So the reason I asked you if you consider yourself an apologist is because I never liked the word. It sounds like you're... I love Jesus, but I'm an apologist. Let me apologize for being a Christian. I hope it didn't oppress you. But it does seem to be a very incredibly lacking element of the American church, which I always differentiate. I always say American Christianity from everybody else, because we are unlike any other Christian. It's getting to where we're not going to be. We're getting to where we get to catch up to the persecuted. But do you see, explain to the people watching, and they're not all Christians, but most are, that watch my show, what got you out of this cult of progressivism? So you had an existential crisis. By the way, everybody that's ever called to do great things for God like you were has a dark night of the soul, seems to be what God does to us. What got you out? What clarity was given you, what revelation was given you, whatever, you tell me. And then what caused you to decide, not only am I going to come back into this game with a refreshed view of Christianity, but I got to go deep now. I got to really understand what this is, because there's no screwing around. This is a much more important issue than the superficial Christianity that has passed for Christianity in America that is no longer going to make it if we're going to survive.
Yeah. Well, what got me out was I remember after we left the church and after I left the class, while I was in class, I would try to debate with the pastor. And I didn't know a lot, so I'd go home and I would Google stuff and I would come back and try to refute him. And I couldn't, because I didn't know enough. And I won a battle here and there, but it was mostly just this avalanche of skepticism.
Like you trying to survive your faith?
Yeah. Well, and also there were other people in the class who were baby Christians. This was their only exposure to Christianity. So I think as a woman, God gives me a natural maternal instinct to want to stay for those people. And I'm thankful for my husband, who finally made the call and said, we're getting you out of this, because we're not raising our kids here. So I'm very thankful for that and for God's order on things. But ultimately, when I was isolated, I didn't have anybody to fight with anymore about it. And so it was just me and my thoughts and what was told to me. And I do remember, I didn't know any of the intellectual arguments he was giving, the historical arguments, but I did know the Bible fairly well. I didn't, like I said, I hadn't learned yet how to really interpret it properly, but I knew what it said. And so when he would misquote or misconstrue scripture, that's what made me go, okay, so if he's doing that with scripture, maybe he's doing that with the historical arguments too. And maybe he's doing that with the science stuff that he's talking about. And so I just remember I was rocking my daughter in the rocking chair in her little room, and the light was off, and it just felt like just spiritual darkness and physical darkness, all the darkness. And I just cried out to God, and I said, God, if you're real, if you exist, if what I've believed about you, and by the way, I'd lived a life of commitment to Jesus my whole life, and with a cost. It came with a cost, even in high school, being kind of the odd one out in some certain times because of that. I'd experienced some of that. But just saying, God, if you're real, you have to send somebody who can tell me the truth about these things, because I knew that there had to be, I just remember thinking, there's no way Christianity has stood for 2,000 years if this guy from Nashville can come up with some questions that topples the whole thing. There has to be more to this. And so the Lord led me to the study of apologetics. I heard some like stuff on the radio, got connected with Southern Evangelical Seminary, where I'm a student now. But I audited classes through them for years, because I don't have a degree, so I just audited. And they really helped guide a lot of that sort of building back. But yeah, that's how I came out of it. God in His mercy. I needed information. I didn't need a mystical experience. I had all the experience in spades. I had all the Bible studies and the camp meetings and the mountaintop experiences. And this pastor had convinced me those were just synapses in my brain firing away. So I needed information, and God in His faithfulness led me to apologetics.
Well, God bless you. It's funny, every year Southern Evangelical Seminary has a conference.
Oh, yeah.
Of philosophy. You've probably been there by now.
Mm-hmm.
But they brought me in
awesome.
a number of years ago to be the MC.
Yeah.
And the guy that was running it, I forgot his name now, but maybe it's a different guy. But he knew of my work, and very few people, I don't think Christians understood what I was doing for many years. They just thought I was a comic, and I do comedy, but I have used Judeo-Christian worldview as my social commentary for 20-something years. For whatever reason, years ago, I realized I want to know a deeper level of this thing. I want to understand. I love philosophy. I never went to college. I'm an autodidact. Everything everything I know, if I know anything, is through my own study and my own contemplation. That's it. Well, of course, you learn from others too. They encourage you, inspire you, and so forth. But the guy was like, "Look, you're the only comic I know that gets this. Like you have some sophistication, some intelligence." And it was like one of the greatest compliments I've ever had, because when I did comedy and brought it into the church, that was my goal. Was because when God called me, I said, I'll go to church if you want me to instead of these clubs, but I don't want to dumb it down. Because I learned to do comedy in nightclubs where you got to be funny or you don't work. Yeah. There is no, you suck, but you did it for Jesus.
Right.
No, you had to have the goods, which I believe the church should expect of us too. So I said, I don't want to dumb it down. The guy said, why do you think I trained you in nightclubs? I want you to go to my people, and I want you to train and renew their minds into the packages I'm going to come in the future, because they're going to have to get used to hearing from me from different places than they're used to, because things are going to change in America, and they're going to have to be prepared to receive it from packages they're not used to. How could I have possibly understood what he was getting at? Well, what this nation was going to become in such an incredibly rapid time. So I know what you're talking about with your moment of truth, with your existential crisis, with God seemingly withdrawing himself. When you sit there on your cross and go, why have you forsaken me?
Oh, yeah.
I have been with you all this time, and this is, now that I need you, you've walked away. What the, is this what you are? It's what why a lot of people become atheists. I believe the number one cause of atheism is pain. Something didn't happen. God help my mom, she's got cancer, she dies, screw you.
Yeah.
That's what I think is going on
There's
with
a lot of that,
most of these people. So when you got into the apologetics, what got you, what route did you take? Was there particular authors? For example, there might be people who are going, whoa, okay, I want to jump in. So explain to them how you think would be the best, especially for somebody that's not necessarily going to go to seminary. But this should be part of their lifestyle now. How would you recommend they even begin this process of learning the deeper levels of Christianity? Well,
we're kind of blessed and cursed at the same time to live in the digital age, right? There's so much bad about it, but there's also so much great about it. We can, if people listen, if they're auditory learners, you can listen to audiobooks, you can listen to podcasts, you can listen to lectures. And that's really how I started, because when I first discovered all this stuff, I had a brand new baby and a toddler. So I couldn't just sit down and read a book, I didn't have time for that. So I listened constantly. I remember this was like over 10 years ago. So there was just I had to have a speaker, you couldn't just connect things like you can now. I had a little speaker there, and I downloaded the SES conference app. And I listened to every lecture that they had on that app, probably 2 or 3 times each. And then from there, I started to discover other people. Like Frank Turek was one of the early ones I discovered, and listened to his podcast all the time, and listened to J. Werner Wallace and Greg Kokel at Stand to Reason, and read all their books. And then there came a point after, I don't know, maybe a year or two, where I was like, I want to go deeper than because those books are wonderful, but they're made just for the kind of here's all the information for the average person. I wanted to read the scholars that they're quoting, in those books. And so I remember auditing, or it was it wasn't an official audit, but you could tune in to the Reformed Theological Seminary's textual criticism class, and half of it was in Greek. I didn't understand half the class, but I was just so happy to be hearing all of this information, And so it was just like that. And then reading some skeptical scholarship and digging into scholarship was a huge part of that for me. And but there's just I think just for a good starting place, J. Werner Wallace's book Cold Case Christianity is a great place to start. I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist is a great place to start.
Well, I mean, I probably started, I don't even remember anymore, but I think the first thing that I can remember that would have had a deeper level of exploration would have been Josh McDowell, Evidence That Demands a Verdict, because he covered so much. But more importantly for me, the history of Christianity. You need to know what this has done to culture. This is not just a religion that made some people happy and at peace. It changed the world to see things through eyes and through a lens that didn't exist before.
That's right.
When a leftist tells you that we believe in justice, they think they invented this concept. Where does justice come from? What is justice? Well, people should be treated fairly. What's fair? Neo-Darwinism, there is no such thing. If I eat you, I won. You can't, and they can't grasp this.
And even some atheists get this. I don't know if you've read Tom Holland's book. About the
Dominion.
Dominion. It's a fascinating read from somebody who's not even a Christian, but recognizes the power of the Christian worldview, how it's had on Western culture.
Well, it's so beautiful when they have the intellectual integrity, to just accept the evidence where it is. Because why would an atheist, in any measure, want to give some accolades to the faith? And he's a Westerner, so if there's anything to hate, it's Christianity, because it created our moral structure. But he said, I can't deny this. C.S. Lewis, of course, is the other guy, that Mere Christianity is still a classic, because it just really, because he started getting into philosophy, he started getting into the deeper levels. Why? because the big question in humanity is the transcendental word. Science, they try to say, is is in conflict with Christianity, which is absurd because Christians invented modern science and the modern scientific method. But science is a descriptive formula. Who, what, when, where, and how. Works wonderfully. It observes what God did and said, isn't that amazing? But the moment you try to say why, you're out of your league.
Or even analyze your data to come to a conclusion.
Yes,
you have to use philosophical presuppositions.
Right, logic, reason, which is racist.
Right.
When you have to call the means to access truth racist, you have lost any sense of an argument towards your belief system. And it should be an obvious problem. If your belief system cannot withstand intellectual scrutiny, abandon it. Why would you give your life to such a thing? So you moved on into learning this at a deeper level, and then you found yourself wondering, how can I help the church? How can I help heal others? You ended up in a podcast that was a means to disseminate this journey you've taken. So what got you into trying to make it a ministry where you could bring it to the masses?
Well, I actually had no intention of doing this as a ministry. I over the course of several years had studied to satisfy my own questions. And when I came to the point where my faith was for the most part settled, I had no plans. I thought that, the world doesn't need another blog. There's enough blogs. They can go to, some of these other great sites and read what they've written that, they don't need me to say it. But so what I did, though, was cross-examine. Frank Turek's ministry offers a yearly training called the Cross-Examine Instructor Academy. And it's where you go and you can get training from all, like Greg Kokel, J. Werner Wallace, all these guys that I had learned so much from. And I thought, well, I'll go to that just kind of as a last hurrah, just like the end cap to my apologetics phase, because I kind of tend to go through phases in my life. And I thought I'll just get to meet all these guys and thank them. But when you go there, you give a presentation on apologetics for an instructor. And that's just part of the one-on-one training that you get. And so I remember J. Werner Wallace was my first instructor, and I gave my presentation, and he told me, he said, you need to do this in the church. And I was like, yeah, but my kids are, I'm just not really into it, and everybody's got a blog, I don't need a blog. Well, then Frank was my instructor the next day, and he said the same thing. And he said, you really need to be out doing this in churches. And I said to Frank, well, I can't really travel, though, because my kids were so tiny. And he said, well, then you need to start a blog. And I just thought, well, okay, if Frank Turek tells you to start a blog, you start a blog. And so I did. And I started writing just basic articles about, does God exist? Is faith blind? Just the basic apologetic stuff. And then I ran into a lady named Amy Hall at a conference, and she asked me how the blog was going, and I said, it's good. I don't really give my opinion on things. I just kind of try to translate apologetics concepts for people, because I also thought, maybe if I start a blog, maybe some of the little Zoe girls that liked the band that are now older, maybe they won't go to Cross-Examine, but maybe they would listen to me. So maybe for them, I'll do it. And she said, well, you should give your opinion. What would you want to say if you could just give your opinion? And I said, well, I'd probably try to warn people about progressive Christianity. So I went home and I wrote an article called 5 Signs Your Church Might Be Heading Toward Progressive Christianity. And it went viral. I mean, up to that point, I'd had maybe... This was a blog. It was a blog post. I didn't even have a podcast yet. I think it was within 2 weeks, it had 300,000 to 400,000 views. And I thought, okay... I didn't think the church needed resources on progressive Christianity because they're making the same claims atheists make. They're just calling it Christianity. So I just didn't think, but obviously it really touched a nerve and people wanted to know about this. So that's when I started specializing on that, which led to the podcast, which led to a book. Well, actually the book came out of a different blog post. It was really the blogging that led to all of that. But in the meantime, I started a podcast and a YouTube channel. Yeah. And it's doing quite well, yes? I mean, yeah, I'm so thankful. I am really thankful to the Lord. I have a long-form podcast that I do myself, and then with my friend Natasha Crane, who's another great worldview speaker and writer, we started a weekly short 15-minute bite-sized podcast called the Unshaken Faith Podcast. And when we debuted the trailer, it went to number 2 of the Christian category on Apple, but it went to number 80 of all podcasts, which, and I don't say that to brag, I'm just so amazed at what the Lord has done. I just can't even believe it, you know?
And be grateful for that. So would you consider yourself an intellectual? And to me, that just simply means it's people that don't just accept things at face value. They ruminate on it. They really, to me, that's what an intellectual is. We go deep in our heads. Do you feel like that's kind of
that is definitely what I do.
Okay, well,
I don't know if I'd say intellectual, because I've always viewed myself more as a flaky artist. I've been sort of this real artistic kind of person, so it's hard. But it is interesting how flipping into that space, I've told my husband, you know, I'll be invited to speak somewhere, and then they'll say, well, could you also lead worship? And there's actually one scenario in which I'm doing that right now, but typically I can't do it because it's too much. It's like one side of the brain and the other side of the brain. And it's too much to flip back and forth. And so I've had to sort of kind of jump in this pool a little more than in the past.
So the left brain is singing. Or I mean, right brain is singing.
Right.
And left brain would be.
I think that's right.
Well, yeah, because the right side is supposed to be the that famous book drawn on the right side of the brain, where you tap into the creative side, which is the right side, and the left side is your analytical side that bails out the moment it has to get creative because it gets nervous. It doesn't want to look like an idiot in front of everybody, so it allows the creative person to flow. Do you think there is a danger? Because I personally feel like I've always been an intellectual, and again, I use that only as a moniker as to the way my brain's wired. It's not better than or smarter than. It's just the way it looks for things. I can't not think. I'm severely ADHD, obsessive compulsive. There's always a double-edged sword with the way your brain is.
OCD can be helpful.
It can be helpful. It can be very helpful. Very helpful and beautiful because you can focus in and nail it. If I went into something, it was 100%. I can't do anything half-baked. I'm all in. Which can also have a negative side if it's, you know, a non-productive perspective. But what I've discovered, and I don't know if you'd have the same perspective, because I think women are blessed in that you have a much cleaner taproot to emotions and to feeling, not so much men. And one of the things I've battled, I think, in my faith is I've never felt like I knew Jesus like a person, like this sort of beautiful, the pictures, he's got a little lamb over his thing, and he's just so sweet, he's got and it's like, and I'm like, I've never known that guy. It's always been in here. I've accepted that, and I've desperately needed that intellect to keep me in the game. Because if I heard an antithetical concept about my faith, it scared me. It's like, oh my God, am I wrong? I can't. And I needed I bring out this sort of fencing ability I had with my intellect. But I feel like I lost or never had access as much to my heart.
Yeah.
So have you always felt that you were more, especially as a single, whatever, more, he's right here. He's and then suddenly you had to go find that?
Yeah,
up
it's
here?
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think, and there's probably pros and cons to both of those things, because, and I think that would be indicative of both a female sort of thing and also an artist kind of thing, which there can be dangers with that, because the danger is creating a Jesus in your own image. You can be your imagination and your nurturing instinct can sort of create this little Jesus baby that that isn't actually reflecting the real Jesus. And some of these, photos like you mentioned, maybe aren't so helpful, because they can tend to depict a Jesus that's more on the feminine side. And really, he was probably, obviously incredibly masculine. He would have to be to physically do all the things he was doing. And really, Jesus being the fully perfect human. I mean, if you really think about that, like fully man is really amazing to think about. And so maybe the danger on the intellectual side is that it's harder to connect to the heart feelings toward Jesus. But I think that's where everybody needs to make sure that the Jesus that we're following follows what's written in the Gospels. Like, we get to know Jesus in the Scriptures. And I think that's really important, because as I've gone into the intellectual side of things, I feel like similar struggle to what you're describing. Now I don't have kind of that.
It's not so easy anymore.
It's not so easy anymore.
Yeah.
And so I think what's really important, and this is what I try to tell audiences, is it's actually pretty good to not have to depend on that anymore, because I know that Jesus is true. He is who he said he was.
Yeah.
I'm a Christian. All of that is true whether I feel it or not. And that's actually been quite a relief to me, because if I can't drum up the emotional experience, I actually kind of feel allergic to those now.
Yeah.
So.
Well, but I just feel like I missed something, to be honest. And it's when I kind of full circle when I was talking about Chuck Smith and a few other folks I've known in my life that have this sort of sense of just a deeper. You know who else has got that? Arthur Blessed. Do you know Arthur?
I don't know.
You know the guy that carried the cross around the world?
I know of him.
He's the only guy I've ever been around that I thought this is what a disciple was like. He's off the hook. Like, you really know him. You really know Jesus. Like, you hang with him. I think I was suspect of the heart because it's subjective, and I feel like I was nervous that it would not be able to prove itself. I needed him to be real, and I don't know how to find him in some people, even like William Lane Craig, shockingly, will talk about that experience, the spiritual experience, as being an equal element of proof of his existence, which I think, well, I don't even know how you. Because Mormons asked for the burning in their bosom. He gave it to me. Everybody thinks God told them the thing. And so I just feel like that's such a fragile way to go find
I actually know somebody who came out of the New Age and is a Christian now, but they said that when they were in the New Age, they had these transcendent experiences just by looking at a tree that we might equate with the burning in the bosom or some kind of feeling we get in a worship service, and they had to that was kind of like a thing they had to work through intellectually when they became a Christian, to realize that there can be counterfeit experiences, and so that's why it's hard to trust those.
It is.
And I get what people say, and I'm not as nearly as philosophically sophisticated as William Lane Craig, but I think it's true we shouldn't discount experience. But we can't depend on it. I think it was my friend TC who said, like, feelings and experience are a great check engine light, but they're a terrible GPS.
Well, I just wondered if, this is going to sound maybe, I hope it doesn't sound insulting, but again, I'm just curious of digging into that thing. I wonder if a woman could almost even struggle sometimes in being able to help other women not rely so much on their emotions and on their feelings, because they can fool you, or they can keep you from going deeper because you want to sort of rest in this thing that feels comfortable, and it's keeping you from the depth. But you're a woman. So you have to sort of overcome your genetic predisposition that God gave you. That's a beautiful, important thing. Is there something you could say to a woman who perhaps thinks, I don't need this apologetics thing?
Yeah.
I know where he is. He's right here, and I do, and I do the coffee thing at church, and we all get together. We cry a lot, and that's really all we need. So, how would you speak to a woman when it comes to feeding her intellect? And does that sound?
No. I love this question. I might not word it like having to overcome my genetic predisposition, but to live it fully sanctified. Because I think there are strengths that women have that men don't have that can be corrupted, and strengths men have that women don't have that can also be corrupted. Every strength can become a weakness. Take, for example, somebody who has an eloquent gift of communication. They're a very good speaker. They can use that persuasion for good or for evil, right? So I think I might word it more that way. But yeah, to be honest, this is something that frustrates me. Now, I am seeing a lot of women kind of waking up to the importance of the intellect, which I think is exciting. I see the women's conferences that I'm invited to speak to, like, we're not just spending our time crocheting blankets and
Good.
Honestly though, but to swing around to the crocheting blankets thing, I would love to see some of those old skills recaptured, because feminism has taught us that any kind of thing you do for the home, almost like, I felt bad even saying that, because it's like crocheting blankets is an amazing ministry. My grandma did that. She'd pray for people while she made blankets. So it's like I shouldn't have taken a shot at that, but
no, I don't think you did. I think what you've done is you've tried to take the stereotypes and the caricatures and take the sting out of that. It's like, what is more beautiful
Yeah.
than creating a citizen and
Yeah. And
a
nurturing
son
in
or,
the
or
home
daughter
and
to virtue.
Yes,
How
right.
is that in any way not
well,
the
and I
most
think
important?
feminism has convinced women that all of the homemaking skills, submitting to your husband, making a good home, that all of that is just sort of like, oh, like that's oppression. That's but I mean, think about the instincts God gave women to nurture and to provide the kind of environment a human being, including all the future men, need to flourish in the world. So, but yes, with that does come weaknesses. So one of the most frustrating things I encounter is when women will say something like, well, I don't need this, but I'm really, because I have faith. But I really hope that can you talk to my daughter, or can I'm going to give your book to my daughter, and I just want to say to them, they're not going to read my book. You have to be the book.
Yes.
And I also fear that women like that will say things like that are one faith crisis away from being talked out of their faith or being talked into a false version of the faith, which is another thing that can really happen. A lot of people can think they're following the real Jesus, but they've fallen for the progressive Jesus, and they don't know it because they're not engaging their minds to compare what they're being taught with what the scriptures actually say about Jesus.
Well, and I think that, what's interesting about the Bible is it's pretty hardcore sometimes in what it expects of us. When the Bible says, study to show yourself approved unto God, a workman that needs not be ashamed, rightly divide. This scripture just said you're supposed to study. You're not supposed to just say a prayer. And then you're good. But you're supposed to study it, so God will approve of a life that He expected of you, because He gave you life. Thus, I expect you to flourish with it and double it if you can. His economy is: I gave you 3, I want 6. I gave him 5, he gave me 10. I gave him 3, he gave me 3. I gave him 1, he buried it. He was evil.
Yeah.
There wasn't none of this woke, but he tried. Matter of fact, the guy with 10, you got too much, give it to him. Opposite. Take it from this guy and give it to the guy who really knows how to work the game.
That's right.
That's our God. Well, what does it mean to submit to your husband?
Well, I wasn't expecting that question. That's why it made me laugh. Well, I think that, of course, we don't want to just pluck one verse out of its context, right? There's a lot of commands in there about household codes, how the home should run. And, of course, the Bible commanding the husband to love his wife as Christ loved the church. When a husband's doing that, it's a lot more easy to submit, right? So I'll just tell you in my life how that submission has looked like. I'm blessed, and I want to say this very gently, and I want to say it with a lot of compassion, because not every woman has a marriage in which her husband loves her like Christ loves the church, and that's way harder to submit to. I know women who are married to atheists who mock their wives for their beliefs, and or if a man is abusive, there are caveats. There are times when you do not have to submit to abuse. You do not have to submit to being mistreated, or you do not have to submit to changing, to living by a lie as far as what's true. So I think what that's getting at is that men are the head of the home, and hierarchy is good and beautiful. And I think that's really important. So in our home, what that's looked like is there have been very few times that my husband has just said, this is what it's going to be.
Yes.
Very few times. Yeah. And the one time I can think of that he did, I think it saved my faith. Because we were at this progressive church. I was the only one in the class. Now, I would come home each week saying, you won't believe what they said. So I was telling him what was going on. But there came a point in time when they invited the spouses. And so my husband sat in the room and experienced it for himself. And I'll never forget, we got in the car. And again, my nurturing instinct, I was wanting to hang on for the people in the class. And he just said, we're done. You're done. We're leaving this place. We're not raising our kids here. And I joyfully submitted to that, even though I was conflicted in my own heart. And I am so thankful that that was the right call that I wouldn't have made. So there have been very few times like that, but major decisions. And I see it as a joy, because ultimately he's the one that's responsible before God for those decisions, not me.
So are you saying that submit doesn't mean that you are less valuable or less equal, but that it's simply saying, I have a particular role for you that is at times going to say that you are going to have to allow, if it comes to that, because we're not a democracy, it's two,
Right.
so you can't just have the tiebreaker unless
Yeah.
it's just the word of God, like somebody's off.
Yeah.
That he says, if that comes to that, then I have to choose somebody. I choose the guy. He gets to make the final call. I don't know any marriage that's ever been successful and succeeded. That if a man does come into it, especially as a believer, and says, I'm supposed to be head of house and blah, 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 that 95% of the time, his call is, yes, dear.
Right.
Honey, whatever
he
you
would
want.
respect his wife's opinion,
Because
right?
guys aren't trying to... We're not
Yeah.
trying to oppress you. We're not going around saying, how much more can I beat my woman? Unless he's some lunatic sociopath.
Right.
But that's another... we
That's a
can't
different
fix that guy.
conversation,
Yeah,
right.
that's a screw up. That this guy needs psychological help, and you need to get out of there.
Yeah,
To
right.
defend yourself.
That's right.
God doesn't expect you to be beaten. But I think that most guys want to please their wives, and so they're happy to say, honey, whatever you would say. But he also does a deep disservice to his marriage and his wife if there doesn't time where he says, I'm putting my foot down, you're going to just back off, and this is the deal. I think women sometimes need that father strength of, I am taking control here.
Yeah.
Get behind me. I'll run the gauntlet.
Because
here.
that's a protective position
I
as
hope
well.
so.
Yeah.
And I just was, wondering if we could sort of clarify that, because I think that, like you said, it's been manipulated into meaning a demeaning role as opposed to simply a beautiful, like to a man, we don't like to be considered less than or have somebody rule over us, but we will bow the knee to a king or to a father.
Yeah. And I think, too, there's situations, I've known women who their husbands were so overbearing that they had to ask about every dollar they would spend, and they weren't trusted with any decisions at all. And I think that's not right either. That's not him loving her as Christ loved the church. And it's really what people don't realize is what this really comes down. It's really a partnership.
Yeah.
Submit to each other, the Bible says. But there's this hierarchy that's really beautiful, because at a certain point, the buck stops with somebody, but ultimately that person's responsible before God for those decisions. And I think innately what we have as men and women are these innate instincts. I think, personally, I wrote about this in my book, I think women are more geared toward individuals. Their emotions are, well, like I can be in tune with a person. Now, there's always exceptions, but for the most part, like a woman's going to be in tune with the individual, and they might sacrifice the group for the individual, whereas men are more geared toward the group, which is important because that gives them the natural instinct to do what's best for the community, where the woman's protecting the individual.
Yeah, the meta narrative. Well, I think Jordan Peterson and I just heard him say numerous times about how women are more interested in people and guys are more interested in things. There's
Yes,
this
right,
more
right.
different way of
And the lobsters. Did you read the lobsters?
I didn't read that,
It's so good.
but how interesting, and maybe telling that maybe the most influential apologist in the last 5 years for Judeo-Christian ethics and the power and the truth of the Bible comes from a man who's not a Christian, and a psychologist, which is Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, because
This
his
guy-
daughter just became a Christian,
Oh,
right?
I didn't know. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't even know that. I've never heard him say he was a Christian.
No, he's not. I think his daughter might be, though. I'm not totally sure.
But my point is, but he is deeply aware of the power of the greatest story in history, which is the Bible. He's like, this is where all the stories come from.
Yeah.
God is using a agnostic, I don't even know what he is, to say, that's how bad it is. I can't find my own. Or maybe it's a strategic move. But let me use something that's not even believers, so that people have to grapple with, what does this mean?
Yeah.
But it kind of brings me to, it took a little bit longer to get here, but I wanted to bring it up just for a moment. So my podcast is about my comedy. My comedy has always used Judeo-Christian worldview as social commentary. And when I came out from the closet and said, I'm a Christian, I'm a conservative, I'm not ashamed of this, and I'm going to talk about it, and maybe there's some people that dig it. And of course, there was quite a few Americans that were pleased that somebody would dignify their point of view with comedy, because there just isn't any. I'm a unicorn. I mean, there's nobody doing what I do. Literally, nobody does Christian worldview as social commentary as a comic. I don't think in the world. So it's an odd place to be. But I would mock political correctness. Now, I've been doing this since, well, I've been doing comedy 30 years, but back in the 90s, I really started to just see this weird thing of PC, and I began to sort of mock and ridicule. And then I realized, you know, you don't really even know what this is. I mean, you joke about it like it's some trend, it's some kind of thing that's popped up that we can sort of make fun of, but, you know, it's self-censorship, and it seems to be sort of degrading free speech and whatnot. You know, if you're going to talk about it, you should probably know a little bit more. And next thing I know, I'm at the Frankfurt School. And I realize, holy crap. Political correctness, cultural Marxism, which genesis came from the Enlightenment and postmodernism, gave them access to you creating God in your own image. No truth, no reality, no revelation. Marxists come in and decide it's not working. The proletariat's not rising up against the bourgeoisie. I guess this middle class, we didn't see that coming. People are actually doing okay. And from that came the fleeing of Nazi Germany, one of which ended up in Columbia University, which began the long march into our academia. To destroy them, we have to get their lineage. From that came, of course, critical theory. From critical theory, we got critical legal theory. From critical legal theory, we have critical race theory. And from critical race theory, we now have deep, unapologetic, racist, bigoted, demonic, cancerous, evil, actually gaining a lot of, well, essentially has overtaken the institutions and is now controlling us. So, why is it that you don't want to teach the true history of America and you don't want CRT in your schools, Elizabeth? I don't understand why you feel that that doesn't deserve to be taught.
CRT?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, because you can't cure racism with racism.
Right.
I mean, that's about as you did a very much more succinct summary, but you can't cure racism by changing the definition and then trying to cure racism with racism. You know, racism used to mean a personal prejudice against someone else because of their ethnic background or their skin color. But even in the dictionary in the last couple of years, it's been changed to that privilege plus power. So it's, you know, to be white is to be inherently evil. It's like the original sin of, but only white people can have the original sin. It's so deeply racist that it's stunning to me that people can't see it.
It's demonic, but I know, as I know you do, it's a religion. It's a religion.
Yeah,
they've replaced Christianity with this new version because it all has, of course, echoes of Christianity, right? There's original sin, and there's this idea of what must be done to the sacrifice that must be made so that we can sort of get on the other side of this. But as I said earlier in my little rant that I went off on, is what it doesn't offer is it will demand repentance, but it doesn't offer redemption.
It doesn't give atonement, right?
It doesn't give you...
There's no mechanism for atonement.
And it can't ever be overcome.
That's right.
It's your genetics.
Right.
And so we will, and it's self-deluding. India has survived for millennia with a caste system, and the bottom rung is the untouchables. And these are people that did something so evil that they came back as the untouchables, and they deserve it. And you don't touch them; they don't get any access to anything because that is what it is. And what I've realized and what I've been telling folks is, it seems to be a new category within the Western culture: the unteachables. The unteachables. They are self-deluded. Now that to me is demonic. I think there is a spiritual force that really became apparent during the cult of Corona, when for the first time in history that I'm aware of, we watched what a one world government could actually, how it can function. Because you have theocracies who bow the knee to no one but to Islam and to Allah, and they bowed the knee and said, "What do you want us to do? We'll do it." We had state-driven, communist, Marxist, atheist-driven cultures who only worship the state and do exactly as they're told, who bowed the knee and said, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And then we had free market, Western cultures that gave us agency and free autonomy, and the idea of the intrinsic value of a human as opposed to the instrumental value of a human, and the idea that that God wants you to flourish and wants you to take control of what He has given you and honor it, but go forth and see what you can create. You're going to procreate. You're going to be a little God. I'm going to give you this little world. I'm over it. And they bowed the knee. And they said, not only do these liberties mean nothing to me, but you're not stealing my constitutional rights. I'm giving them away. And that's what broke my heart. Because I realized they don't care anymore. I can't fight for liberty and freedom if my people aren't going to join in.
I think it was Os Guinness that said that he never thought that Marxism, or just this kind of cultural Marxism, wokeism, whatever you want to call it, could penetrate business, but it did.
Well, and that makes it, without God's intervention, it makes this unbeatable. Because now they can decide, you don't get your money now. You don't get to buy anymore. You don't get to sell. Again, for the first time in human history, we see how somebody can decide, if you want to buy or sell, you got to take this mark.
Yeah, you can see the setup, can't you?
We might actually be the ones at the end of the book. I never would have said that. I'm the most unconspiracy theory. I gave up when I read the late great Planet Earth in the 70s. And I was into the eschatology. Oh, this is amazing. And then I realized nobody knows what they're talking about. It always changes. It's Russia is, China. I mean, it's actually, and it was and of course it's Kennedy the Pope is like, and I literally gave up on it. Said, you know what Jesus said? I don't even know he's coming, but I'm going to figure it out. Do you think we're at the end of the age? Is God saying, I think we're done?
I don't know. I don't know.
Give me your instinct.
My instinct says that the level of evil is not necessarily unprecedented, but everyone's access to it and its proliferation is unprecedented because of the internet. So I think that there have been, you read about Pol Pot and all these, there's been horrendous evil. The Roman Empire, horrendously sexually perverted, but there's never been just everybody having a megaphone into everyone else's homes before. Right. So I think the
bullies follow you home. You can't escape.
So I think there's definitely something to that, and I think no matter what your eschatology is, there's definitely the idea that Jesus is coming in the future, right? Whether you're pre-mill, post-mill, mill, whatever. Jesus is coming in the future, and it's, I don't know. It's not looking good for the post-mills right now. I have friends, I tease them. I'm like, are you sure? Because it's not looking great for you. But then they'll say, well, maybe it could be 10,000 years from now, and it'll change a couple more times. Who knows? Maybe. Yeah. But, we see in 2 Timothy, it says people will be lovers of themselves, proud, boastful. And again, we've seen those things happen before. So I'm like you, I'm always kind of skeptical to say this is it. I don't know. But I think we should always be ready as if it is.
No, that's what he says. Watch and pray that you're not deceived. Well, and there is a very self-serving, sort of arrogant attitude that American Christians take. Like when we start suffering. Right. Well, clearly God's done.
Right.
If we have
Take
to
us
pay.
Home. Right.
Meanwhile, Chinese Christians are going, really?
Like,
welcome to the club.
Yeah, right.
Let us know when you're out of 10 years in prison. Talk to me about your oppression because you can't pray at the football game.
Right. They use prison as their seminary time in China.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, so as we get ready to wrap this up, and I don't want to because I love talking to you, and I'm so grateful you came out. But I just have a couple more sort of end games. One of the things I said when I started this podcast, and I would talk to the people, I said, I'm not interested in a podcast that talks about how great conservatives and Christians are and we laugh at the left. Because there's plenty of guys doing that better than me, and they got millions of people watching. Why would I do that? But more importantly, I have an obligation as a believer, I believe, as Christ follower, to find solutions. To see if is there something we can actually do to try to fix this? Now, maybe not. I don't know what the rules are. Maybe God is done with us. Maybe he said, America, it's your turn. Yeah. I don't know. But I say fight until then. Don't give up my territory, and I make it very clear. But we've never talked like this. I always make it very clear. I do not worship the United States of America.
Right.
I worship Jesus Christ. But I am grateful
Yeah.
for this nation, and I believe I'm responsible for the territory I was given. I was born here.
Mm-hmm.
I was given a First Amendment right to defend this nation, which is the hierarchy that God has created in governmental systems that states you're allowed to use the law of the land if it's not biblically heretical or whatnot, or goes against God's truths. So what would you say to Christians who maybe were nominal Christians or have sort of skated all these years in this superficial, cheap grace that is not going to sustain them anymore? Because the wheat and the chaff are being weeded out, and God is looking for the truth, not the posers, because hell is here. What would you tell them as to why it's so important to go deeper into your knowledge of faith and a study of faith, and how they should perceive their faith moving forward to get into a richer, more robust way of serving God?
3 words: read your Bible. I mean, I think that if Christians became biblically literate, it would change so much. You're probably aware of the recent studies done by Ligonier, and that they discovered that, now this was based on people who profess to be evangelical, which could mean anything to them, but something like not even 50%, or just above 50% of evangelicals even think Jesus is God.
Yeah.
I mean, it's abysmal, the theology of Americans in the United States. So I think reading the Bible, knowing what God has revealed to us, getting to know his nature and character in the Word of God would be the number one thing. And I think also catechizing our kids. We have got to teach our kids to think critically about these issues, which means introducing the bad topics to them, which is counterintuitive for most parents. I did not want to introduce the topic of homosexuality to my 8-year-old daughter, but I did. And I am so glad I did. So glad I did, because we have open conversations about all that stuff now, because she knows mom's not going to freak out. Now listen, my kids, I'm not a Calvinist. I believe my kids have free will to choose God or walk away from him. So, but what I can do is my best to teach them to discern through topics, to think critically, to spot bad logic, to know what the Bible says, to know what God has revealed about his own nature and character. So I think, raising up our kids to think critically about these things, and us to be biblically literate ourselves.
And I do believe, and have been for so long, that it's probably one of the biggest travesties in American Christianity is that the pulpit hasn't been used as a training ground for a Christian worldview. That for some reason, I think they're fearful of going deeper. And it's like, well, because people aren't going to want it, and they just want some simple sort of Tony Robbins version so they can feel good about themselves. And it's like, I'll lose people. And the truth is, lose them.
Yeah, lose them.
They're not in.
Yeah.
You
and
need
then your
the
church
people
will grow.
Yeah. Oh, well, look what happened with COVID.
Yeah. Yeah.
The federal government, who despises us, had the audacity to say, your church is unessential. And I said to the folks, I said, if I was a pastor and they told me that, I would have not only opened the doors, I would have ripped them off the hinges. How dare you? How dare you tell me? Well, not only are we essential, we are the single most essential thing right now. I didn't say you gotta come, or that you can't wear a mask, or you can't take the vaccine. Though I think all of that is nonsense, and I'm so grateful I didn't do any of it. But what we will is that we take the name of this room seriously. This is sanctuary. You need us right now. We're here. That is the legacy of Christians. And if we can't provide that now, then let's just quit pretending.
Yeah.
And let's go join a different religion. Or just get hedonistic and enjoy the goods while it's here, because things are wrapping up one way or the other. Well, I thank you so much for being here and just spending time with me. I'm going to ask you one more question. That'll be sort of my last one, but it's shown later.
Okay.
So I can try to get subscribers, because I'm broke. And I'm still waiting to get paid eventually on this podcast. And you people keep watching for free, just sucking the marrow from my bones. But here I sit, because it's the cross I have to bear. But one thing I want to leave the folks with. People that have been in this Christian world like us, who happen to be in the performance arts, or have been, and even in your case, even though you've kind of moved into this sort of ministry level, are given a certain, I guess, a certain special consideration. If you're a pastor, or if you're, a sense of celebrity. Okay, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So they forget that we're humans. They see the game, they see the facade, they see the role, and they don't have any idea that we're just trying to figure this out too. What was the most painful thing that some Christian ever said or did to you when you were just trying to serve God that you had to grapple with, and how did you get through it?
I'd have to think about that one for a second.
No, you're not allowed to think about it. It has to come right out of your gut. And you can name names. We're going to call these people. No, we're not. And if not, how about just a general, what you think is one of the most misunderstood perspectives of how your Christian treats those of us who are in places of authority, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, I suppose I hesitated with the question because in the work that I do, it's really more been the progressive Christians that have been so brutal. Real, genuine Christians, for the most part, have just been wonderfully supportive. I mean, Calvinists, non-Calvinists, charismatics, cessationists. I've just been so encouraged and lifted up by so many Christians. So it's hard to think of one on that side, but on the progressive side, I've been slandered. I've had my reputation. They've tried to discredit me. They've tried to ruin my reputation. They've tried to convince people that I'm a judgmental person, that I'm locked in some kind of hyper-fundamentalism and I don't love people. I mean, this is a narrative I read about myself online all the time. So that's probably, the most painful is reading things about yourself that you know are not true, and yet, because they repeat them so often, people start to believe them.
Yes.
So that's probably been the most painful, but that's actually coming from people that I don't, I'm not going to judge their soul, but it's coming from the progressive Christian side of things.
It was interesting to me when I heard Joe Rogan one time talking about, who I think is the biggest podcast in the world, how he doesn't even read the comments because it's too depressing.
Yeah.
What was interesting to me was, here's a guy that has the most success. I mean, he's got millions of people. What does he care what some idiot says to him? He does.
Everybody does.
Because you're human.
Everybody does.
I don't want you to say you hate me. So I just think it was fun to kind of see fun. It was hopeful to realize we're all in the same boat, and in the end, we're trying to get to, what are we really seeking? Peace. People are just seeking peace. And you know how you find that? Not in something you can figure out, not something that you can contrive, not something that you are going to be able to find through some sort of ideology or some kind of bumper sticker mentality. You're going to have to humble yourself, and you're going to have to bow the knee, and you say, there's got to be something bigger than this, and that is in the form of God. And there's only been one guy that ever did that and proved it by doing miraculous things. Look, I'm not a cult because David Koresh can't turn water into wine. Hey, look, I'm not a cult because I can walk on water. Then he dies and comes back to life, and then says, I control nature. I'm the God-man. And a 1,500-year-old book was written to validate something that has never been seen before or since. It happened one time. There's no evidence for God. Oh, there is every second that you breathe. God is saying, I'm right here. But you get to choose to see the supernatural and the natural or not. But I will tell you this, there will be no escape when you face the living God. So just believe in Jesus and join the rest of us who are doing the best we can under very difficult circumstances to be free. And that is what Jesus offers. This is God's Comic, Brad Stine. This is Brad Stine Has Issues. This is Alyssa Childers. And I am doing my best to do what I do every week. I'm just putting the woke back to sleep.
God bless you.